Welcome to my cellar one more time. Let's just jump right into it, shall we? All right. Photographs of Carlsbad Cavern. Oh, all right. This is in reference to Theater of the Mind. Photographs of Carlsbad Caverns can help with the imagining. Well, yes, if you've seen them. Now, I've known of DMs who have, on rare occasions, provided a picture of something. Might be a strange looking weapon. It could be a cavern, I guess, whatever. However, I don't find that as effective in this case of showing them, because now they're limited to what they've seen, and what they've seen has parameters, and Theater of the Mind doesn't for that very much. But anyway, next comment. That intro is amazing. Well, my producer, Jim Waffler, will be delighted to hear that. To help the kids imagine. After we realized they couldn't do that well, we started with minis and gradually over several games used less and less, replacing terrain with random objects or scribbles on paper, gradually going more abstract with less until none was needed. I like minis and the crafting, but it's not a requirement to most games unless we're going full tactical with armies. I like to use them from time to time, but never want them to be a crutch. Always just a fun, optional tool. Well, I think that's a very healthy outlook. I must concur with it in most approving terms. I'm not against minis. It's just that I feel that the experience of playing role-playing, particularly for the first few times, is enhanced by playing it only in your head. Just my personal opinion. Next. Like you, I prefer prayers for clerical types. They have holy books, not spell books. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was those 8 years the nuns were pounding crap into my head or whatever, but I always felt a little ginchy about clerics casting spells. Now, I don't know why it is. I just did. And so I still feel very much along those lines. In the way mine works, if you're at, we'll say, 4th level working toward 5th, when you reach 5th, you will be assumed to have learned any prayers, new prayers that go with that level. That's part of getting there in my world. Your mileage may vary. Due to the size of the gaming group, we do use a leader. Splitting the party often occurs. Who's in charge is often situationally based. The fighter might not be the best to speak for the group. At the Abbey, for instance, the group has done pretty well at self-regulation on this. That's good. That's good. It means that either on a subconscious or a conscious level, your group is aware of how a dynamic works in a group, and that everybody has something they can contribute at any given time. And I think that's a wonderful thing to become ingrained in a group. That, okay, this situation is my métier. The next situation might be Jeannie, the thief. It might be her time to shine, or whatever. Everybody should be able to contribute something to the group at somewhere along the line, whether it's common sense or something related to the character class they're playing. There's a sense of accomplishment when you do contribute something that is acted upon and turns out well. It's a great deal of accomplishment and good feelings toward yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that if you don't become an egotistical, drooling maniac. The speaker is just a convenient way particularly with new players, a convenient way to learn players how to, or to teach. sound like Jethro Clampett. It's a good way to instruct new players in etiquette, in efficiency, and it certainly takes a load off the DM when he doesn't have to shout all the time and let them come up with the conflicting theories and choose one rather than you having to prod them toward one. I'm all for making it easier for the DM because, by God, we put in all the work already just getting this adventure written and figured out. Okay, in answer to the book smart player characters, the in-universe reason why it's not an AC5 monster is it's a different species. I've done that. I've had players run into different colored boulets just to screw with their heads a little bit and knock some of the I already know what's going on. I think it's important for adventurers to remember that, okay, it looks like a camel and it smells like a camel. It's not necessarily a camel. Not when you're playing in a fantasy world. It might look like a camel, and it might shoot lightning bolts out of those big drooly nostrils on the front of that long, elongated face. Whoa, wouldn't that be a surprise? And I can have them. I've set up scenarios where there's a couple of big badass things, but they've been beat up and they're recuperating, and so like, oh my God, look at that! We just stumbled onto 2 trolls. Well, maybe the trolls only got 12 or 15 hit points each because they've already been beat up. They're recuperating. They're old. They're infirm. They're coming off a disease. Whatever your excuse might be as a DM. And by the same token, you can have a monster with more than the stated stats for the same reason. Because you want to. But also, you only have to go so far to justify what you're doing. These given monsters took 5 more hit points than they might have because they were buff and they just came back after a training regimen, and you need a very paper thin excuse. And if you got some clown sitting at your table that's totaling up the damage on what you're fighting, and then goes, hey, wait a minute, that's too much. What do you mean it's not dead yet? Well, nope, not dead yet. You give them a reason. It's buff. It just came back from a health spa. It's found a spring that has curative and healthy waters in it, whatever. But you have to smack those everything by the book players up alongside the head every now and again, get them to realize that relying on the book is not going to get them through every circumstance, every situation. At best, the book is a guideline as to what you might expect. And just because it says it's got 6d10, let's make it big, 10d10 hit points. Okay, and on an average die rolls, that'll be 55 hit points. But I want to give them 80. Okay, you can always violate the average in your favor, or you can go under for the same reason. Well, by the same token, you can go under for whatever reason you want. They just got back. They've been sick. Whatever. They're starving. And you can always come up with some good reason. And you need to take those people that come in with the book memorized and send them back on their heels once in a while. No, everybody doesn't know everything. I've heard stories of people rigging their dice to be cheats, but never experienced it firsthand, thankfully. I've heard of people slightly melting the dice while on a high die face, like a 20, so it'll mildly flatten the die just enough to give it uneven, unfair rolls. I've been told it can be done in a microwave. I'm never going to experiment, but it's a crazy idea that anyone who go to that length to be an asshole. Yeah, let's stop right there. We'll get to the rest of this. I agree. The person that cheats at a game like this isn't cheating anybody but himself. Okay, he's taking unfair advantage of the other players, perhaps. Trying to take advantage of the dungeon master, perhaps. But when it all comes down to it, he's only cheating himself. I have heard of softening dice in a microwave. I have heard of, doing other weird things, trying to make dice funny. And I have been guilty myself back in the very early days of doing the process I've described of taking 100 new dice out of the carton and rolling them and taking the high ones out and rolling them and keep taking the high ones out until you get ones that consistently roll high. Okay, that's not cheating. Cheating comes in when you have a die roll coming up, a save you need to make, and you then use one of those funny dice in an effort to get around or make the save or whatever. That's cheating. That's absolutely cheating. I don't understand why anybody would do that either. Back in the 80s, I bought a joke set of 3D6 for like $5 that were weighted to always roll sixes. No way I was intending to cheat with them. It was just a novelty gag. Not to mention, these dice were so weighted that they wobbled around unnaturally like those Weebles toys. So they wouldn't ever be convincing anyway. Everyone had a laugh when I pulled them out and rolled them. I put them away with my collection. They basically sat there for the past 35 years. Expensive for a 30-second gag, but it was fun. Yeah, there were funny dice going around, and I don't know how they were doing and whether, whatever. But again, if you're playing in a role-playing game and you resort to using rigged dice, you aren't cheating anybody but yourself. You are taking unfair advantage of all the other people at the table. If you're cheating rolls, deprive one of them of something they legitimately should have received, then you are cheating them also. And I can tell you this, that if I even think somebody's cheating at my table, I will speak to them immediately upon the session ending. And if I see it again, no questions asked, goodbye, don't bother coming back. Oh, my idiot cat's playing with its stuffed Mario doll about this tall. The cat has a thing for little stuffed animals. I've never had a cat like that. You can probably see him down here in the corner, in the very corner there, my lower right, on my left side, throwing it up in the air and catching it. We find it in bed with us as often as not. He brings it in at night. I am not sure why. Completely agree with the idea that a new gamer should be able to sit down and not know a single rule for that first session. I've introduced new players like that. I sat with them during character creation and guided them where it made sense, but let them make their choices. Then we started playing, and they just sort of figured it out as they went. If the DM runs the game well, the players barely have to know the bones of the game. Let the DM do all of the heavy lifting. Yes. And back in those hoary old days when only a few of us were tottering around with handmade dice and sets of the early game, I'm sorry, I just saw my cat's ass sticking out of my bookcase, so God only knows what he's doing in there. Um, I would even go so far as if I had a couple, three newbies, I would hand them a pre-gen and say, okay, for the purposes of this first adventure, this is who you are. These are your, and briefly explain what the six stat categories mean. And go from there, roll from there. I've done it that way. I've had complete newbies that have signed up for one of my games, even though they apparently didn't read the restrictions on the game about some experience necessary. But I've never had a problem where we couldn't accommodate them and let them kind of figure it out as it went along. All right, idiot, get out of there. Sorry, my cat's bothering us again. I know the backstories for playable characters did not weigh very heavily in the minds of early players, but I'm wondering if the age of characters you or others played was often mentioned. Our backstories with brand new characters is, hi, I'm Clem. My parents have been farmers, and this is my scythe. We had an extra one, and so I cut it down a little bit and made a very handy weapon with it. Hello, my name's John, and I've been studying for 3 years to be as an acolyte for the sect of the Holy Blunders. And that was about it. Hi, I'm this sword, this old rusty but still serviceable sword, was carried by my grandfather in the last set of Goblin Wars, something like that. That was it. That was it. You didn't need anything else. Now, we did engage occasionally in spinning yarns and whoppers that we would say was our backstory, but no, it didn't really. We didn't really get into it, and there's a game that requires a backstory can be no more than 3 sentences long. I love that. I would say even less than that. I'd say 30 words. Let's get some real economical writing going here. Age? No, age never was never bandied about. It was always considered that there were, late teens, young 20s. A hedge wizard might be a little older because they might have spent an apprenticeship with another magic user. A cleric might be a little older. Might be 20, 22, 23, simply because anybody younger has probably not been ordained or, past the bar or whatever, below a certain age. But no, not for the most part. No, it didn't really make a difference. Now, if it came to something like ill effects of something aging you, a D6 years or something like that, then it might have been necessary to determine, okay, how old am I now? And okay, now if I get aged 6 years, what do I, how old am I then? But for the most part, no, it was sort of assumed that we were all bright, young, eager beavers setting out in the world with a fortune in our minds, the one we were going to win. Let's see. All right. I imagine a magic user, for instance, would have to be at a minimum around 30 years of age, unless they were some type of prodigy. Well, I didn't make that assumption. They probably weren't 16. But, again, age doesn't really come into play until you get into longevity and effects on constitution and all that kind of stuff. And now you're talking about life expectancy. And so it really didn't make any difference to me whether I was expected to keel over by 57 or 77. If I'd had any luck at all, I was going to be retired, and if I hadn't, I wasn't going to live that long anyway. So, no, I can't say that age played much of a part. I don't know if the jerk at Gary Con was in my game, but I think it was. A bit dickish when one of the players told you, "I'm just getting into your head," like some sort of accomplishment he was going for. Yeah, you might have been sitting into that game. Because, yeah, he was dickish. I'm very interested in how you dealt with ley lines and high-low mana in your home campaign. Inspired by you and the little I've heard you explain it, I created a D100 table for a daily roll or roll for that session, and it determines the level of magic. Okay, now, all right, and so there's a table, and it's, probably the vast majority of time, the odds are that it's going to be a low or weak magic. I didn't do it for the day, though that's an interesting idea if you find yourself trapped in a large complex or underground in a huge dungeon layout. That's an interesting possibility. Mine was more based on areas. For instance, the ruins of a village that was ruined a long time ago could be really low because all the mana had been sucked out of the surrounding countryside from the horrible confrontation that took place there. Or there could be a residual of heavy magic still present in an area. And again, if you can always make up a backstory on why it is, why it's higher, why it's lower. And most of my world, 90% of my world's normal. But when you get into, for instance, an extensive set of ruins, I would have high mana all over the place, so it's just dangerous as hell to even try and light a torch for fear you'll cast a fireball instead. Now, all of a sudden, magic isn't the go-to, end-all, be-all. Because it's dangerous now to everybody concerned. Or it's not the solution because it hardly does anything at all. Now you got to figure out a way to do it non-magically. That was mainly my motivation in doing that, was to force the players to look at different options to play and force them to use them. I wouldn't do it on a daily basis, again, unless they were trapped in some really bad place that had a lot of residual magic. Perhaps I might do that. Okay. All right. This is a question about writing. The myth of the audience, or who do you write for? When you wrote your modules, did you write them to entertain or satisfy yourself? Or did you visualize an audience or a 14-year-old boy in Milwaukee and try to write to that imagined average Joe? Mainly, I write adventures to try to be different than things I've seen before. I'd like players that play in my adventures to do something different, something new, something unusual. Snake Riders of the Arredondo. I published the first one with Eldritch. The second one's been written, but nothing's been done. I may combine the two into a big module called the Island of Arredondo with Wizard Tower Games sometime maybe next year. But right now, no. But in the Arredondo, I gave them a challenge. These horrible beasts that the nasty little evil fae were charging around on were neither here nor there. They were constructs. So they were very hard to damage, but once they were damaged, it was very hard for them to heal. And so not only did they have to figure out that, oh, they're not completely of this world at some point, but then they had to sit and figure out a new way to fight them. I like to write chunks of all my adventures, when possible, to have a good significant portion of outdoors. We'll go back to the Arredondo. As they were fighting the retreating bad guys up the peninsula, the bad guys were laying traps. Some of them were pretty crude and easy to find. A couple of them were less so and harder to find. Pits with stakes and snakes or whatever along the sides of the trail, and so that if they were ambushed, they'd dive off the trail and fall. I copied the Viet Cong in a lot of those things, quite frankly. I want to write a story that hasn't been done before. I'm not vain enough to say, oh, I can take a given story and do it better. I know I can say I can do it differently. When I'm not fooling around with different kinds of creatures. For instance, Island of Arredondo has a strain of fae that have become corrupt. I mean, thoroughly and completely corrupt, evil, malicious, malignant. Far worse than even any of the fae in the original mythology of Western Europe, or even Central Europe. They had to deal with something that didn't fit the comfy parameters of the book. Organized resistance as they battled their way through the jungle, rainforest actually, to the last holdout stronghold, the Eagle's Nest or the Eyrie or whatever. And so they were outdoors. They had to deal with outdoors. They had to deal with ambushes and traps and stuff. They had to deal with an unfriendly environment. In a science fiction piece I wrote for an adventure I wrote for Eldritch, I created a sentient planet. And I did it using cheap science fiction. The planet is literally riddled with this new element that is even more efficient than silicon. And in the course of the high energy probes probing the planet, they set off a cascading reaction, and now the planet begins to come to life as it expands through all the interconnected veins of this mineral. And so I tried to give it a pseudoscientific reason, and now you get something that you come up against that you probably never come up with against before. A sentient planet. The planet can literally open itself up and absorb things, never to be seen again. The planet can deploy narco plants that can put you to sleep. The planet can connect with you mentally, psionically, some way, and bring you into what's going on and letting you know that it's not trying to be malignant, but rather beneficial. I'd never seen anybody create a planet that could think, so I wrote that. I wrote another adventure where all the adventurers get transformed into mice, and they have the same set of objectives to carry out, except scaled down to mice. And at the end, after they've done what all the mice had to do, well, then they're transformed back, and lo and behold, everything that humans were supposed to do got done, and the problem was solved, and yay! All right, because I wanted the players to find out what it was like to be 3 inches tall in a world of natural hazards, like snakes and roosters and cats, good old tabby cats, hedgehogs, or hedgehogs love to swim, I found out. And so when they're trying to pull their way through the rice paddy on giant leaves, the hedgehogs rise up below them and pierce the boats, and basically they hold them up for ransom. I like to think that I'm putting the player characters into a situation they've not seen before and making them think down new pathways in their brains. The Lost Adventures were more of the old school type of here's the plot, here's all the things you got to do, etc. But I gave them stuff like, well, if they screwed up and they released the undead lich who had been hasted, it generally ends in a TPK, because he comes bursting out of the mausoleum they just released him from with his big crystal mace that all he has to do is touch you and you're paralyzed. And then he just comes back and boing, 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 takes you out. How do you deal with something like that? They shouldn't even have to. If they were smart, that would never happen. I like to punish people for not thinking. Not necessarily lethally. Well, once in a while it does get lethal. But I like to, I think that the best way to learn is through fear and pain, and this is a good way to do it. I don't really think that way, but okay. So a follow-up was there any sense that TSR module authors or contributors to the Dragon were writing with an audience in mind? Well, yeah. Everybody that ever submitted an article to me for publication in the Dragon, that's why, because by being in the Dragon, it would now be read and seen by thousands and thousands more people. Of course. True, complete, total introverts don't generally write magazine articles. It's not been my experience anyway. They can be shy and shed their shyness at the keyboard, but of course they knew they were writing with an audience. They're called customers and potential customers. I kind of think our writers usually write something they themselves would like to read, or in some way to try to cobble together an imagined audience to write for or to, although sometimes writers may write for another person, a distinct person that they know. Okay, that's not why I write, but that could very well be why a lot of other people do. I write what I write because I want to challenge Joe Gamer. I want him to be in an environment he's not comfortable in, so that he has to think outside his preconceived box. Okay, now, I briefly mentioned a minute ago the Lost Adventures, so I have some updates on that. You're going to see this on Saturday, which is the 1st. So I can say that between the 11th and the 15th, by the 11th to the 15th, they will be shipping. We are this close to being done. The last thing being done is the hardboard covers are being skinned. And then it's run through the binder and into an envelope and out the door. So, finally, yay! We have gotten close to that. I know that Donna's been keeping all you Kickstarters aware of our Trials and Tribulations. We had hoped to come out with this at GaryCon. I got sick twice. He got sick once. His once was way worse than my twice. Stock problems, you know. And then to top it all off, what happens? A tornado hits the FedEx building that's got our stock in it, our paper stock in it. I mean, if there was something that could screw it up, it has. But it's coming. Of this, I assure you. Now, I'm going to do something different here. I'm going to suggest that if your coffee cup is empty, if you're watching this with your morning coffee, if you're whatever, you know, if you need a pit stop, whatever it takes, now's the time. And I'm even going to put in a little thing. You can fast forward through it if you don't want to do it, or you can hit the pause button and take the time you need. We're actually going to only pause about a real minute. But I have a tale to tell. And it's going to involve some telling. So that's why I'm telling you. Now would be a good time to take a pit stop, refill the coffee, get another Mountain Dew, twist up another Duber. I don't know what time of day you watch this, nor do I care. And I'll see you back in a few. Okay, I'm going to tell you a tale of woe, a tale of villainy, a tale of sleazy, slimy behavior by villains best left to rot underneath the garbage in the dumpster. It all has to do with a game called D20 Delving. In December of 2022, I was approached by Wizard Tower Games to do the audio portion of this board game that they have created. It's a fun game. I looked at the game before I made my decision, obviously. You know, even though I was being paid, money's not everything. I'm not going to pimp a bad product, no matter what they pay me. And I was impressed by it. It's a board game, much like the old Dungeon game that TSR came out with. And it seeks to overcome one of the old problems that the TSR game had. And that was a million little cards about this big that you had to set out in every room and, you know, and everything. It's got some refinements. The premise is pretty much the same. You're exploring, looking for good stuff, and trying to meet whatever the requirement is to win the game. That game might be different in another game. Pretty simple, easy peasy. There's several kinds of cards. There's monster cards, trap cards, treasure cards, room cards. And the novelty in this was that I was going to record all the cards. I was going to read the cards and they would be recorded. Each card would have a QR code on it that you could scan with your phone, and then people that either couldn't read, had vision problems, were too young to read, whatever, would know what was on the card. Brilliant concept. I was delighted to become part of it. We're still waiting to get it out. And let me tell you why. There's an individual in this industry who tried to horn his way in without any understanding of the way the business and the hobby and the fans all coexist together. He's caused many a racket, much noise, a couple of dumpster fires with his bigoted and objectionable viewpoints. And he's called me a thief, said that, claimed that's why I was fired from TSR. Has claimed my good friend, has called him a pedophile. He trolls Don Zamora and Wizard Games every chance he gets. He's bitter because his facade was seen through, and a couple of people said, "Whoa," and backed up. I'm one of them. Said, "No, I don't think I care to be involved with you and your endeavors after all." Now, he's so dim-witted that he can't. I guess he thinks that we won't notice that one of his pseudonyms or one of his fake accounts or whatever you call it starts with the same first four letters as his real name. But apparently he thinks we're too stupid to do that. He continually trolls Don's videos. He's accused Don of being a racist and a bigot because Don simply made a video explaining that it's not him, it's the law that says if you sign a contract with a person, they have to use their legally recognized name. It was in regard to a trans individual who didn't want to sign a contract with what trans people refer to as their dead name, the name they no longer use. Well, unfortunately, the law does not recognize that. And so Don simply went on and explained that, and he was attacked as being a bigot and a hateful person. And this is from an individual who's already twice gone on to rants about how filthy nasty he finds trans people to be. Hard to figure out where this guy's compass is. Now, there's times when things happen and you know deep in your heart why, or who was behind it, or some rationale or some meaning. All right, with D20 delving, twice the U.S. Customs was given an anonymous tip that the container containing our stuff had suspicious content, and so was impounded. The contents that belong to us from that container are still being held by Customs over a year later. Okay, reorder. First time was just a paper order. Second time was completed games. Wouldn't you know it? What a coincidence. Another anonymous tip to Customs and Homeland Security that the container containing our games had contraband in it. And once again, he got pulled to the side, ransacked by customs, nothing was found, and we were screwed. Now, this individual that's behind all this, I know he is, has already caused a dumpster fire or two out of Wisconsin a year or two ago, making wild, off-base claims about various individuals. And he's just generally a troll and a miserable, slinking slime of an individual. I wouldn't spit on him if he was on fire. If I stepped on him, I'd burn the shoe. Despicable example of a human being. But you'll notice that I've never named any names. Those of you who follow what's going on in the industry already know who I'm talking about. And, well, he hasn't attacked me for a while, so I guess I'll be next after this. He'll troll me for a while and put on some bogus comments. He's already done that a couple times, and I've taken him out. This individual is so bitter at perceived slights and injustices that he will ruin other people's opportunities. This person, within the next year, isn't going to have 2 nickels to rub together. So I'm guessing that this is his last hurrah, and he's trying to sabotage this brilliant game. The game that NPR wants to interview us about. The game that the National Association for the Blind wants to look at. The fact that we might get that kind of exposure is just eating at him like a perforated ulcer. Except in this case, unfortunately, the perforated ulcer isn't going to kill him in great, horrible, writhing pain. For the trouble he's caused to all the other people, if there's karma, that's how he'll go out, feeling like worms are eating his intestines. Because they'll be the worms of his lies and manipulations coming back at him. Let's see, what else? He's so bitter, just so bitter at perceived slights. He casts aspersions the way Shriners throw out candy at a parade, just willy-nilly into the crowd. My consoling thought about all this is, very soon he will be penniless. And that's why we're still trying to get D20 delving out. That's why Don is printing it himself. Don has all the equipment, the machinery, and etc. And by hook or by crook, we're going to get that game out. It's a brilliant game. It's fun for the whole family. And it has all those lovely advantages for people with sight issues or too young to read, or, whatever reason. We really feel that this game can have an impact and entertain a whole brand new segment of the gaming or the potential gaming population. All right. I guess I'll wrap it up saying that my fondest wish is that he be boiled in a vat of his own spite, slowly and miserably. And on that cheerful note, I'll say, Dodata Govi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree.
High as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.